Thanks, Austin. So hello, everyone, and thanks for having me here today for this presentation on cryptocurrency and real estate.
Hello, how's everyone? I apologize for being a little, just a minute or two late signing in.
No problem. Angela, is it okay with you if I just get started here?
Sure, go ahead.
Cool, thanks. I was actually just about to mention a special thank you to you, Angela, for inviting me here, because this is actually a topic that I'm really passionate about. And I know we have, I think, an hour booked here today. This is probably something I could talk about all day if I were allowed to. And I think you'll, hopefully during the course of this presentation, you'll get to pick up on some of that passion that I have for this. So a little bit about me. So I am NAR's, National Association of Realtors, Director of Emerging Technology. It's essentially my job to look at any technology out there at all that could impact or disrupt real estate and learn as much as I can about it. I've been in real estate for 12 years now. And for 10 of those years, I've been working at real estate associations. So for those of you who are doing the math at home, there's 2 years they're missing. For those 2 years, this is in 2016, 2017, I actually left NAR because I was so obsessed with blockchain and crypto that I moved to New York City to work on my own blockchain startup, where we were doing fractional ownership of real estate on the Ethereum blockchain. And if none of that makes sense to you right now, that's fine. That's why we're here. We're here to learn about this. Really, all you need to know is that I'm a software engineer, I'm a tech researcher, I'm overall just someone who's absolutely obsessed with the intersection of real estate and technology, new and emerging tech, and of course, blockchain. So really, really excited to be here today to talk about this. This is something I actually used to talk about all the time back in the last hype cycle of blockchain, like 2017, 2018. I probably presented on it 30 times a year. But this is actually the first time I've talked about it recently. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to come do this. To let you know, I also wanted to try to find a way to give myself a little bit of street cred here with the audience, to let people know like why it makes sense for me to be here today talking with you about this topic. So that last startup that I mentioned, because of that, we were featured in the New York Times when we first tokenized a few townhomes in Brooklyn, New York, to be traded on the Ethereum blockchain. I've been featured in the Boston Globe on how blockchain and crypto can help make the home buying process faster and smoother, more secure. And the third one on the list here, TechCrunch. Now, if you look at the timestamp on that, 2013, it's like, that's pretty old. Why is Dave, claiming that gives him street cred? I really just wanted this audience here to know that, like, I've been in this for the long haul, right? That article that I wrote in 2013, it got like over 500,000 views. And if you're not familiar with TechCrunch, in the tech industry, it's one of more reputable brands. So the fact that I've been doing Bitcoin mining and been into this since 2003, I thought would also help justify why I think I might be the right person here to talk to you about this. And when I give my opinions and my hot takes later, you'll know that I'm not coming just as someone who's learned about blockchain recently. Again, I almost said passion, but really it's more like obsession. A little bit more on that. So here are a couple of screenshots. The first one is 2013 when I was mining Bitcoin at my old job. I guess I don't work there anymore, so that's okay. But and then the one that's when I was mining Bitcoin. Then the one on the right is a live look into one of my spare bedrooms where I now mine the Ethereum cryptocurrency. When I show this to people, like they ask things like, does running cryptocurrency miners in your spare bedroom cause any unrest at home? But considering that it helps contribute to our monthly mortgage, my wife is more than okay with it. She also likes to fill our home with plants, so that's kind of to give it a give and take. So quick agenda on what I'd like to cover today. First, I wanted to talk a bit about the group that I'm in, which is the Strategic Business Innovation Group at NAR, and how all of this emerging technology research that we do, how that kind of fits into the big picture at NAR. Then I'm going to mention a couple other tech trends that we're looking at besides blockchain and crypto. Who knows, Angela, if this goes well, maybe you invite me back to talk about one of those other trends. And then I've got a lot of content to specifically just talk about kind of some history on blockchain, some potential use cases in real estate today, a little bit about cryptocurrency, and then kind of just where I see it going from here. If there's time, we'd love to do some Q&A. I've got all your video feeds up here on my left. So if you've got any questions, just put them in the chat and maybe we can answer them as we go too. With that, I wanted to talk a little bit about my group within NAR. So I'm part of the Strategic Business and Innovation Group, which has kind of 4 subsets to it. The first one you might be most familiar with, and that's our Strategic Alliances Group, which is our runs our member benefits program, that drives value to you, our members, through its products and services. The third group listed here, but the one I'll mention second, is our Realtor Information Group. That group manages our top-level domains, or TLDs, the .realtor and .real estate that hopefully many of you are taking advantage of for the great branding opportunities that they provide. The third group I'd like to mention that's also within SBIT is Second Century Ventures. That's actually a wholly owned for-profit subsidiary. That group started about 9 or 10 years ago. It was initially focused on just making investments in residential real estate technology, but now since then, as it expanded to commercial, we've gone global, we've got Southeast Asia, we've got Australia, we've got the UK, we've got Canada. And that's just kind of one of the ways that NAR influences the real estate industry through its strategic investments. And then finally, the group that I'm in is part of the strategy and innovation team. Again, where it's my job to just look at all of the technology out there, see which ones are going to impact our industry, see what's happening in other industries, see which one might make that jump, and then provide educational content back to you, our members, and other groups within NAR. So just a little bit more about my group. There's 2 of us. The way that we do our work on a day-to-day basis is we take a research-first approach, right? We follow the technology, let that be our North Star. And then we follow the tech, and that leads us to so many great relationships with startups and large enterprises, right? So we make connections with the startups who are using this new tech, see how it's helping them, differentiate them from their competitors, how it's being applied to our industry. But then, like I said, we also make these great connections at large enterprises, right? So I'm regularly meeting with Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, because we want to know if any of these companies are ever going to want to make a big play into real estate, right? And if they are, how we can best advise them for our members, right? We want to help be kind of like your insurance policy against disruption from these large tech vendors. So that's kind of part of my role, right? I'm not just a tech researcher. I'm also a scout. I'm here to learn that if there's interest in these companies to getting into real estate, that make sure that we're part of the conversations, and so that we can advise them just for the betterment of the industry. So at any given time, my team is looking at, say, a dozen or so different technologies. We're checking in on their growth, how they're trending. Are they going to impact real estate? And on this list here, beyond blockchain and crypto, which we're going to talk about here in just a second, I'd say the three other technologies that are seeing the most impact right now are, artificial intelligence and computer vision. We're also looking a lot at 5G and also looking at augmented and virtual realities. The reason why we're looking at those 3, it's pretty simple, right? We're looking at artificial intelligence because it has the potential to make our members more efficient and close more deals. We're looking at 5G, which is the next generation of wireless tech for your phone, because that can impact where and how people live, which is also relevant to our members. And then finally, we're looking at the augmented and virtual reality because it's impacting how homes are bought and sold. Okay, so that's it. That's my intro spiel. Thank you for humoring me there. Now, at this point, I'd like to move on to the real topic of today, and that is cryptocurrency and real estate. I do think it would be useful, however, to talk a little bit about the underlying technology of cryptocurrency, which is blockchain, and why, in my opinion, why it makes so much sense for our industry, right? And I think the way that this is best explained is if you think about all of the different players in a transaction, not just the buyer and seller, obviously, but the agents, the escrow agents, the attorneys, the insurers, the investors, the recorder's office, there could be 40 to 50 different individuals involved or touching a single transaction, right? And closing times these days, where are they 6, 8 weeks? A lot of that delay is because due diligence is repeated over and over at a lot of these different steps. And having all of those different groups I just mentioned involved in the transaction, that actually provides tons and tons of opportunity for people, for cyber criminals to take advantage of, right? If you've got 40 people who are touching a transaction, if you can get access to one of their mailboxes, you can potentially commit fraud. Even today, wire fraud, it's still a major issue facing our industry and our members. And I don't know if you've been on like Craigslist recently or Facebook Marketplace. They are just cesspools or scams. And I've just, on a weekly basis, I'm reading about, again, because of all these different players involved and because they're all using different systems and it only takes access to one of them to potentially screw up a deal. This is an area where I think blockchain and crypto could actually help. Not that they don't have their challenges in themselves, but we'll get into that. So when I'm introducing cryptocurrency as a topic to you as practitioners, I want to make sure that you kind of understand how it could help because of some of the challenges we have in the industry today. But I also want to make sure that you understand the underlying technology of crypto itself, which is blockchain. Now, I'm going to do my best to explain this to you again. This has been something I've been doing for 8 or 9 years now, and it just moves so quickly. I feel like even though I study it every day, I'm still getting further and further behind every day. It's something every time I look at it, I learn something new, and I'll do my best to explain it here in simple terms. But if you have any questions, we'll save time at the end, and we'll make sure we get those answered. So with that, I'd like to just try to simply explain what blockchains are, because I know there's just so much confusion around that term itself, right? So really what blockchains are, they're just like a new type of database, a new type of way to manage information. Blockchains are systems that manage an ever-growing list of records or transactions. And then that list of transactions is just maintained across several different computers in a network. So these transactions, they could be anything, right? These could be deposits and withdrawals that you make at your bank. These could be, purchases at a grocery store. These could be details around a property, right? This ever-growing list of transactions could be things like when a property is purchased or refinanced or sold. And what makes blockchains different than regular databases, though, is that when records are added to them, they're permanent, and they're also easily auditable by all parties involved, meaning everyone has visibility into the data. And again, blockchains are the underlying technology that makes cryptocurrencies possible. And so, and while blockchains and you hear about hashes and all this advanced cryptography, all that can be very difficult to understand, but really the basic idea behind them is pretty simple. What blockchains are able to do is they're able to provide an independent, verifiable, and trustworthy record of events and transactions. And when you think about what I just mentioned before about how closings can take so long because diligence is being done by all these different parties at the same time with no one trusting each other. If things like property records are able to be managed via blockchain, it could save everyone a lot of efficiency and speed, and would allow you to close more deals faster, more affordably too, right? I'd also want to take a quick minute to kind of just graphically talk about how blockchains got their name, right? So when I'm talking about those ever-growing lists of transactions, purchase, refi, sold, inspected, recorded at the recorder's office. When I'm talking about all those different transactions, the way that they're stored in this type of information system is, depending on the blockchain you're using, at a predetermined amount of time, whether it's 30 seconds or 10 minutes, a group of those transactions are recorded to the chain permanently. And those transactions are called a block. And then when when they're added to the system, they're tied together in a chain, right? So each block contains a timestamp and a link back to the previous blocks. And that's kind of how this type of technology got its name. Now, there's all sorts of fancy cryptography at work behind the scenes here that keep the blocks in order and keep the network secure and allow you to independently verify it. I don't really think we need to get into that today, but I would like you to understand what kind of just the core tenets of what a blockchain is and how it's different from, like, say, a regular database that your city recorder's office might work off of, or what your MLS might be using. So one more time, those core tenets are, as you see here on the screen. In order for it to be a blockchain, in my opinion, the information that's being stored on it has to be distributed, meaning multiple people, or hopefully everyone, has their own copy of it, right? Imagine a broker had a copy of all of their local MLS's data. If that was so, it would be very easy to tell if somebody was trying to commit fraud, right? If someone were to change something and you had your own copy and you know that they're going back historically and changing something, you could easily flag that because you have your own copy to check against, right? So that's what I mean by distributed. Immutable is really just a fancy word for permanent, right? When records are added, because of the way the blocks work, and the way that they're tied together using that cryptography, you're not going back and changing things. I just got a question in the chat. I will be sharing this slide afterwards. I'm happy to share it. I've got a couple of slides coming up that really were the whole presentation could probably be boiled down to. We'll get to those in just a few minutes, but yeah, I'm happy to share this with Angela afterwards. And keep the questions coming if you got them. We can keep this conversational if you want. But so distributed, permanent, and verifiable. Verifiable, that part just means that there's an established method out there for people to kind of go back and check the facts, right? Like, this is my example here would be, like, even though this isn't a blockchain, in the auto industry, we all have most dealers, and when you're buying cars, they'll have like a Carfax, right? Everyone's kind of agreed on that. There's an established way for people to go back and check those transactions, right? So those are like the core tenets of blockchain. That's probably as technical as we're going to get. I just wanted people to understand, when you hear of cryptocurrency, when you're hering Dogecoin and Bitcoin and Ethereum, that this is the tech underneath the hood that is actually powering it. So this tech was first used and introduced in 2009 with Bitcoin. This is the first popularized blockchain application. So it's over 10 years old now. And what Bitcoin is a currency that doesn't require a centralized party or bank, right? Again, it's distributed. There's no person in the middle controlling it. Everyone who wants to get involved can have a copy of it, and there's an established way to verify it. Now, Bitcoin and blockchain, at least when I was doing this in 2017, 2018, I found that those terms were confused all the time. But really what I see is Bitcoin as an application for blockchain, the technology. So to make it even more simpler, right? You think about your iPhone or your Android. You've got applications on it, and then you've got like iOS as the underlying operating system. So Bitcoin is an application that uses blockchain as technology. And hopefully that'll make more sense when we start talking about the application specifically for real estate, which I've got coming up in just a few more slides. So it's been around for about 12 years. This technology has grown a bit over time, right? So in 2009, the Bitcoin blockchain, really that's primary use and only use for now is just payments, right? Which is a great first use case. There's been some more technology since then, like Ethereum in 2015, 2016, that have enabled things like smart contracts. We'll get into that in a bit, but I wanted to quickly mention, like, so cryptocurrency, like, why does NAR care about this? Well, if there's a technology out there that isn't in the industry yet, but it has a potential to improve property records, right? Improve how properties are being recorded, improve title, improve fees on payments, make it easier for international buyers, reduce risk, and get people to the closing table faster, then as an emerging technologist for NAR, my ears perked up, right? So that's kind of what got me really obsessed with this in the first place, is that from a very high level, this technology seems to apply very, very well to our industry. It hasn't quite taken off yet. But if you were starting say you were starting a real estate recording project from scratch, blockchain would be something I would definitely take a look at. Of course, we can't do that. We've got hundreds of years of incumbents here in the US, so it's going to be very difficult for this technology to take a hold. But it would be such the perfect use case. And when you read about blockchain and other industry publications, everyone always mentions what industries this is going to disrupt. They always say supply chain, they always say real estate, right? Hasn't happened yet, but it's something we're keeping an eye on. If you're looking for an idea of the scope of the cryptocurrency, how established it is and just the size of it, today, it's the total market cap of all cryptocurrencies. If you add up all of the tokens, Bitcoin and Ethereum, Tether, and all the stable coins and all of them, today it equates to about $1.3 trillion. When I was giving this presentation 4 years ago, this was about 10 times less. It's also very, very important to know that these markets are extremely volatile. If I gave this presentation a month ago, this would be 2.5 trillion. But it's lost half of its value in the past month if you add up all of the different currencies involved, which there are hundreds. There's not hundreds of reputable ones, but there are hundreds of them out there. So it's 1.3 trillion, 10 times what it was just 3 or 4 years ago, last time I gave this presentation. And one more thing I'd like to mention again is that many blockchains can involve cryptocurrency, but they don't have to. There are a few out there. They haven't been as successful as the ones that have a native cryptocurrency. There are companies like IBM who've invested heavily in projects called Hyperledger. Those, you might hear the term, if you're into this space, things like distributed ledgers versus blockchain. So really the point of this slide is I just want to make sure that so cryptos use blockchain. Not all blockchains have crypto, but the most popular ones do. But there are also things that can be done with blockchain that don't involve payments, right? So these could be things to establish identity or enforce contracts. And this brings me to my next slide, which if I could kind of summarize the whole presentation, it would be this one here. And this would be just, in my opinion, all of the different ways that blockchain could be applied to our industry. Now, I know there's a lot on here, so I'm going to take a second, I'll grab some water, and then we can kind of go through each one. So again, like having been researching blockchain for real estate specifically since 2015, the first use case that everyone talks about is title, right? If we have these shared immutable systems that everyone trusts, like why can't we use that to record property ownership, right? Like why does every time I refinance or why does every time I need to trade a property, do I need to ensure that the person doing that has actual ownership of it, right? Or doesn't have any liens on the property? Again, if we were doing this from scratch, blockchain would be an amazing use case for title. But it's not that simple, right? I actually, I kind of did like a road show on blockchain in 2017, 2018, and I was speaking at a bunch of land title groups and everything. But again, just in our country specifically, the way title insurance is required for like even getting a federally backed loan, it's just, and there's so many incumbents in the industry that would not benefit from this type of thing that it just makes it's going to make it very, very difficult for this technology to catch on. And that was kind of a hard pill to swallow for me, right? Because I love this technology so much, and I'm a software engineer myself, and I'm just like, oh, why aren't we using the best tech for the job? Well, yeah, that was very naive of me, right? It's not always the best technology that wins or the most appropriate technology that wins, but it's for sure one of the most talked of use cases for blockchain is title and recording of property. So I wouldn't be doing my job here if I didn't lead with that one for this group. And again, if you got any questions, just drop them here in the chat. I've got like maybe 4 or 5 more slides, and we'll spend a good chunk of time on this one. But happy to answer any questions. I do know that I'm like kind of intense when it comes to this topic. Like there was part of me a week ago where I was like, do I even need to put a presentation together because I can just go when it comes to this topic? Um, anyways, so the second use case beyond title that I see for real estate is automating legal agreements, right? So I mentioned before that Bitcoin started in 2019. That was kind of just a payment network. In 2015, Ethereum launched. That added another layer to blockchain where now it's not just transferring money back and forth, but now we can do things like smart contracts. Now, when I say smart contracts, I don't mean like uploading a PDF to DocuSign. When I say smart contracts, those are actually like snippets of code that can live on the blockchain that can automate parts of a transaction, right? Um, so leases, purchase and sales agreements, all of these things can be made programmable and could sit on a blockchain so that when milestones within a transaction are hit, things could automatically be triggered and move us along, right? There could also be tons of enforcement that could be done using smart contracts and on-chain agreements. We're seeing a little bit of this, right? I'll talk about NFTs in a moment. Those are all kind of versions of smart contracts. If you're on a cryptocurrency for real estate webinar like you are here today, you've probably heard of just tokens. You might even invested in a few. All of those tokens underneath the hood are actually smart contracts themselves, right? And the ability to be able to send them back and forth. The rules behind that are all based in smart contracts. So that's kind of like been the biggest shift so far, right? Like 10 years ago, blockchain first on the scene, we can pay each other without a bank. Cool. Now we can do things like enforce legal agreements without a middleman. So legal agreements, another prime use case for real estate. Of course, right? If Bitcoin was the first use of this technology, why isn't maybe I should move payments up on this list because these days it's not easy, but it's not as difficult as it was. If you had a buyer who say invested early into Bitcoin or one of these Ethereum or other tokens, they might want to purchase property with crypto. That was a little more unheard of 4 or 5 years ago, but these days there are companies out there that will help you help you with that. Accepting rent and escrow, I think, would be another good first step into crypto being used in our industry. Now, I have to be very careful as a technologist who really loves this stuff. I want to make sure that I don't have my blinders on and just try to force this down people's throats. I do think it would be great for it, but if we were starting with it, I would start with rent and escrow, smaller ticket size for use of blockchain. Just because you start talking $500,000 on a blockchain in a transaction that can't be reversed, I would get a little bit nervous. But if it's your monthly rent, say $1,000 or $1,500, or I say earnest money or something like that, I think blockchain and smart contracts can be good for that. So we've got title, we've got legal agreements, and we've got payments. 3 very vanilla at this point use cases for blockchain. These next 3 are a little bit more out there. In my intro, I talked about fractional ownership. That was actually so I left Chicago in 2017 to move to Brooklyn, New York, where I worked for a company called Consensus, which is the lead blockchain development company in the world. I led a team of 15 different engineers where we wrote those smart contracts that I was just talking about to be able to take properties that were owned by private equity groups and tokenize their interests in those properties, depending what percentage of it they owned, and gave them the ability to trade their interest with each other without any intermediaries and without needing legal. And they could do so 24 hours a day, and they could do with settlement time in 15 seconds, and they could do it for fractions of a penny. So fractional ownership is really interesting. I was obviously way too early, right? Trying to do this 3 or 4 years ago when people really didn't even understand what crypto was or how any of this worked. In hindsight, we were terribly, terribly early. But as emerging technology researchers today, I'm seeing all of these companies today kind of doing fractional ownership in real estate, just maybe without the blockchain, right? those are the Dotloop founder is now working on a project called Picasa, which is essentially fractional ownership of second homes. So there's for sure a play there. When you start, again, using smart contracts and tokens to represent ownership, you really do gain a lot of efficiencies. Our company was approached by a lot of real estate companies for investment just because they wanted to simplify their back office, right? If they own dozens and dozens of properties and they've got dozens and dozens of investors and they're trying to just keep track of who owns what and provide them liquidity and provide them tax forms at the end of the year, just all the bookkeeping alone, if you're able to get that onto a blockchain, it solves like a lot of those issues. Again, blockchains have their own challenges, but as far as keeping records, they're fantastic systems for that. So fractional ownership is definitely a use case for it. I tried and failed with it. There are some companies trying again. Well, that's certainly one to keep an eye on. Again, if you're keeping up with this kind of hype cycle of blockchain these days, one of the terms that you hear about all the time are NFTs. Like you're seeing NFTs for art, you're seeing NFTs for property. Like what the heck does this even mean, right? I personally don't like the term NFT. It stands for non-fungible token. It's just not a great acronym if one of the letters in the acronym means it doesn't stand for this, right? So it means non-fungible. What fungible means in this case is, think about like a dollar bill. Like a dollar bill is fungible. You could trade it for 4 quarters. You could change it for 10 dimes. It doesn't matter. They all add up to the same thing. With NFTs, it means that really what they're being used for is like digital blockchain-based certificates of authenticity, right? And while I personally am not very bullish on the future of NFTs, when you see things like art being traded on Sotheby's auctions, digital art being sold on Sotheby's auction sites for like 10, 12, 15 million dollars, where the ownership of these pieces of digital art are being traded for those amount of dollars, I for sure have to at least mention it. There are companies out there. There's a company that NAR invested in, Proppy, that's a blockchain company that is doing NFTs for like access to properties. So essentially, if you own this token, you have full use to this property. Again, this is just me. I'm not that big on it. I would prefer, if I'm going to have a token represent a property, that it be fungible, that it could be divided up, that it could be shared, that it can be used by many people. I think the fact that it's singular and can only be accessed by one person is actually a limiting feature. I'm not sure what it gets us in real estate, but who knows? There are people out there who are very bullish on NFTs. There's people out there making tens of millions of dollars on it. I just don't see it for us. But I've been wrong before. And I see some questions here in the chat that I'll get to in a second. Let's just close out on this slide. I added decentralized finance here because even, you might be familiar with the term crypto winter in like 2020, where the markets really bottomed out and it crashed, and it seemed like the whole industry was just going to go under. I was very like it was a weird time for me because I love this tech, but then it wasn't working, and there's a lot of like emotions involved there. But there was always one part that kept me really fascinated about the potential of this tech. At that point, I was thinking like, maybe this won't work for real estate. Maybe I was just wrong the whole time. But it really seems like what kind of kept blockchain and crypto afloat over the past 2 years, and where I think it has the largest upside today, and that could impact real estate, is decentralized finance. It also goes by the term DeFi. If this is an area that you're interested in and you want to really go down the rabbit hole, DeFi is what you should be looking at. The easiest or simplest way I could explain it is like Wall Street 2.0 without the centralized banks, right? If you think about all of the traditional services that financial institutions offer like lending, currency exchanges, all of those are now open to anyone in the world with an internet connection and without a central authority. There are now protocols out there that if you have a certain amount of Bitcoin or a certain amount of Ethereum, you can get loans that can provide you access to capital in real dollars that have negative interest rates right now, right? So as opposed to paying your normal percentage to get access to, say, a mortgage, if you've got enough crypto and you trust these systems enough, you can actually use decentralized finance to take a loan that will pay itself off over time automatically. It's wild. And again, these are, I couldn't personally imagine trusting like 500K of US dollars to a smart contract that's being owned by someone else. But there are people out there that are doing it. There are people doing it in commercial real estate for like insuring leases. It is really the wild, wild west. It's amazing. And again, like when I said, I could probably just put up the word DeFi and talk for an hour on it. I for sure could. So while these other things I talked about, like NFTs, I'm not really bullish on. Title, it's just too big of an industry to kind of to get into for real estate. If real estate is going to be impacted by crypto, or where it'll be impacted by crypto first, will be on the financial side, because DeFi is really starting to eat into fintech, and there's just so many things that could be done with it that are so hard or slow or costly in traditional finance, that this is where I see it going. But again, I've been known to be a bit of a zealot here when it comes to this stuff, and I might be too in the forest to see the trees, right? But that's where all the growth is. You know, we're talking billions and billions of dollars being added to these protocols. Probably too niche for this audience, but again, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter. If you ever want to have like DeFi specific conversations, like I'm totally here for it. I really, really love talking about that. But in general, I think these 6 things are ways it could impact and where it might impact first. Again, DeFi, if you're really finding yourself falling in love with this stuff, that is where I would recommend focusing your energy. All right, so this is kind of where we're at today. Where we're at next, like what's next for crypto and real estate. Again, like there's a DeFi tangent that I just went on, and thank you for humoring me for that, because I know it gets a little trippy. I don't know how else to describe it. That definitely futuristic, right? But you have your director of emerging tech here. It's kind of my job. So what's next for crypto and real estate? There are groups out there like RESO that handle like real estate standards, like they determine how MLSs talk to each other. There are groups out there that are looking at like, okay, what if we were to put like open houses and changes to property details on a distributed ledger? They've got work groups around that. They're going okay. It's not like major breaking news like RESO is going to announce something tomorrow and all of a sudden all the MLSs will be on a blockchain. It's not that, but they're working towards it, right? So there are smart people working on this in real estate that are considering it. I think saying any more than that would be a stretch, right? Because despite like the number of opportunities, it's still going to likely be a number of years, if ever, for this to enter Main Street real estate here in the U.S. The tech is still gaining maturity. There's still so many regulatory hurdles ahead, and we're just in the early stages of people trying to apply this tech to real estate directly. Like there's a couple here that I've got listed. I mentioned Proppy doing the first real estate NFT, and I understand why they're doing that. They're capitalizing on the excitement around NFTs. I personally don't get it, but Natalia, the founder of Proppy, she's fantastic. She's one of the sharpest people in this space. It's more likely that I'm just not getting it than they're not doing it right. Like I trust that they've been ahead of the curve this entire time. So they probably are in the right here. I just personally don't get it. Maybe I should book some time with them and talk about it. And then I mentioned fractional ownership before. There is a company called Realtor that is just buying up a bunch of homes in Detroit and listing them on blockchain. And for like, say, $10, you could own part of a property in Detroit. I think they're focusing on that area now just because of the low cost of entrance to the market. Essentially what they do is they create an LLC for every property they buy, and the tokens that you buy give you part ownership of that LLC. And then they use the blockchain payment rails to give you your monthly rent of the properties that they buy. So this is a weird presentation for me, right? Because here I am like, totally obsessed with this technology. I personally think it's going to change the future, but I also have to be a realist because I've gone down this path the wrong way before, where I've thought this was going to change the world, and it hasn't quite yet. What the future holds, I mean, I'm not quite sure, right? I could see DeFi eating into the lending side. I could see tokenization helping the back office, but as an agent, I don't think there's anything you need to worry about. I don't think this is going to change your job, right? I do think, like, if this enters our industry, it won't be agent facing, right? It would more be like the technology underneath the hood that secures the transaction. So we're 40 minutes in now. I'm going to just close up here with like 2 slides, and then we can just go straight into chat. Because I've seen some questions come in, and they're good ones. And I want to make sure that you get your questions answered here, and it's not just like an hour-long soapbox for me to wax on blockchain and my thoughts, which seem to be a bit bipolar, if I was judging myself. So before we finish here, what's next? So we talked a little bit about what next for blockchain and crypto. First, what's next for me and my team at NAR? We're going to continue to focus on real estate, tech, and any adjacent industries where, say, things like artificial intelligence or 5G, how it's going to impact us. We're going to continue to meet with those startups or those large enterprises. We're always building out our prop tech community. We love doing presentations like this. My colleague Dan Weissman and I, we do bi-monthly prop tech meetups, where I'll put this in the chat. If you want to learn about all the different technology that we're looking at, you can go to meetup.com/proptech. I almost sent that as a direct message to somebody. You can follow us there. In addition to that, I'm also responsible for curating a lot of the technology content that you'll see at NAR. So whether it's our legislative meetings in May, or whether it's our emerging tech and business forum at annual, or even conferences coming up like IOI. Because I'm so deep into this tech and prop tech, I'm like a good curator of who should be on stage, because as a software developer, I understand which tech is legit, which one isn't, and I want to make sure that when I'm presenting technology to you, and that, like, when I'm distilling down all my learnings, that we get you the best possible audiences. So that's it for me. That's what I'll be doing for the next 6, 12 months, or however years, or however long I end up working at NAR. But before we wrap and switch over to the questions, I wanted to just make one announcement here and formally invite you. This audience is the type of audience that I would love to have at IOI, right? If you're into cryptocurrency, you're in the blockchain, that already means that you're already into emerging tech. The IOI Summit is, if you haven't heard of it before, it's NAR's premier tech conference, right? It's going to be this year. It's going to be in person in Dallas, August 17th and 18th. It's intimate on purpose. It's going to be about 500 or so people. We're going to have tech-savvy realtors. We're going to have, dozens and dozens of startups. We have an amazing pitch battle where all of these companies come in and they pitch their new products to realtors, and who's going to be the next winner of the pitch battle is always an exciting part of the event. A day and a half of content, probably 20 different speakers, panels on VCs and investment in the future of real estate. You can scan that QR code there for some more information. I'll leave this slide up for a minute because as someone who obviously gets excited about real estate tech, the IOI is my favorite conference of the year. And I know that sounds very biased because I helped to design it, but I attend some of the other tech events in our industry, and I feel like they're more just very, very sales focused. Who can I pay the most to get me leads? You won't see that here. You're going to be learning about like artificial intelligence and how that's going to impact the industry, or how technology can help with social equality, or how buyers can use tech to combat this low inventory problem, things like that. I think more like, it's not like a pay-to-play conference where people on stage are just sponsors. It's not that at all. It's a fantastic event. And if you're into crypto, that means you're probably into tech. And if you're into tech, you should be at IOI. So that's my one sales pitch here. Sorry for that. Again, this is something I'm super passionate about. You can get my contact info here. If you'd like to add me on LinkedIn, I'm posting about this stuff all the time. sorry for another QR code, but this is a blockchain talk. We can probably handle two QR codes. If you want to add me on LinkedIn, you can scan that right there. You'll be brought right to my profile. At this point, I think we got 10, 15 minutes left. And I would love to, I'd love to just answer some questions. I can go through the chat, or Angela, if we want to kind of just have a free for all here and have people unmute their mics and ask questions, I'm good with that. But I guess we'll start with the chat. Scroll up.
Yes, we can go ahead and start with the chat. And if you have any questions, they can unmute themselves and ask.
Cool. And again, thank you, Angela, for this opportunity. Hopefully I lived up to the promise of like explaining how passionate I am about this stuff. So thank you for giving me an hour with such an amazing audience here to talk to. Looking like at some point, reading from Jerry, at some point in the presentation, could you explain the connection between Coinbase or Binance and connection to crypto? So Coinbase and Binance are two centralized cryptocurrency exchanges. Coinbase is based in the US. Binance was first started in China, but now has operations in the US. They're two of the largest for sure. If you were, again, I'm not going to give like investment advice here on this presentation, but if you wanted to acquire crypto as just part of your investment portfolio, Coinbase is probably the most well-known, reputable one, FDIC insured, if you wanted to do that. Personally, Coinbase is one of the ones I use. I also use, since I'm such a nut over this stuff, I've got probably like a dozen different accounts. I've got crypto and Robinhood, PayPal. No one hack my accounts, please. But I've got Venmo, you can buy crypto now, Circle, Gemini. Hopefully I named enough competitors there so that I don't seem biased. A question from Marty asked if I could share the recording. He also added a comment, I hope he doesn't mind me sharing, that this training is a little bit like a foreign language. And I apologize for that. If that's on me if I haven't made it simple enough. It really is a tough topic to wrap your head around, right? It's like a whole new way of storing information. So yes, I'm happy. It looks like this has been recorded and it can definitely be shared. I'm happy to share my code as well. Next question is from Jen. She's asking about two other blockchain technologies, Cardano, Hedera hash graphs. Bit of background, like hash graphs are similar to blockchains. They're not exactly like them, but there's some like technical details in the background that allow them to transactions process faster and things like that. She goes on to mention that she's heavily invested in Ethereum, but wants to look at maybe future crypto for use in development, or maybe like possible diversify. Again, like I could probably lose my job if I was up here giving like investment advice, so I won't. But the technology out there that I'm keeping an eye on that I think could, obviously Bitcoin and Ethereum are the well-established players. There's a couple out there that could potentially impact the success of those, and therefore maybe affect real estate. That would be like Solana or Algorand. It's a little bit more of the same, but if you're heavily invested in one and you're looking at others that from a technical perspective, not investment perspective, from a technical perspective, I think show promise, it would be those two. More comments from the audience here. Yeah, title companies. I would love for them to get involved here as well. I've seen some insurers like play around with it. I was very excited when they started inviting me to speak at their conferences. I thought that would be like a good step in the right direction, right? Like if title companies are inviting blockchain experts to speak to their agents, then maybe this is them adopting it. I mean, there's a couple different ways to look at it, right? You could think title has the most opportunity here to use this, but there are some others who might say the title has the most to lose here. I'll leave that up to you how you feel like, but there's a chance that some people might see it as a threat, and maybe that's affecting the adoption, or maybe the technologies isn't the best for it. It's hard to use. It's new. It's incredibly technical. It's, there are still hacks out there, right? It's not like the most bulletproof tech you can use. So for institutions and like when real estate and title that have been around, like some of the oldest institutions ever, like what's their motivation to try bleeding edge technology? So, there's a lot of reasons why they haven't. A question from Raphael: Why do I buy crypto on so many different platforms? I'm just a nut. I want to evangelize this technology, right? I want more people to accept it. So when Overstock.com in 2015, they started accepting Bitcoin for payments, I bought like new boots. I bought a filing cabinet with Bitcoin. My filing cabinet is right here right now. In today's Bitcoin prices, this $90 filing cabinet cost me 10 grand had I just held the Bitcoin. So I'm not bitter about that at all. But really, the reason why I bought in so many different places is because I want those reports to look good for those companies to embrace this technology more, because I think it's just a beautiful piece of technology that I'm in love with, right? Comment from Brian: I totally agree, right? Some of these platforms carry obscure tokens. Like these days, it's gotten so easy to launch a token. I could launch a token here, like before this presentation is even done, and we could hand out tokens to everybody, and all of a sudden we could say like, oh, everyone should buy this, right? And there's so many scams involved with it. Like it would literally take me 10 minutes to launch a token. And some of these seem to get notoriety and some don't. Yeah, Brian, I'll airdrop you some, what should we call them? The Royal Association tokens, and then, I don't know, you could use them for member benefits or something like that. It seems to be very, very random about which ones take off. There's a lot of people like pumping these up behind the scenes. There's a term out there called like being rugged, as in rug pull. Like people will launch a token, they'll try to sell it to everybody, and then it turns out to be a scam, and people just sell out, and people lose a lot of money. So I would be very careful with investing this stuff at all. If I was giving any investment advice at all, it would be just very careful. Looks like we got more questions. This one is a DM. One moment while I read it. Feel free to drop some more in. Looks like someone here is on the mortgage side. I won't say who they are. They wanted to buy a property, and they're converting Bitcoin to USD to prepare cash to close. It looks like they had some problems with like verifying it, like because I had the same issue, right? So I was looking to buy a house about a year and a half ago, and I've been in Bitcoin since 2013, so I've got some significant holdings, and it's we'll call it a non-zero part of my overall net worth. And I had to liquidate my holdings like 6 months in advance because I was worried about a mortgage company seeing a large deposit from a Coinbase or a Binance, and then like flagging me and making me not eligible for a mortgage, right? So like I can like stand up here and like say like Bitcoin and blockchain and crypto are the future for real estate, but even as someone who's as closely involved in myself, there's still just like a lot of fear around it, right? I would not want to be able to not qualify because I converted to USD too soon before I applied, right? So this thing just it's while I trust it with a lot of my net worth now, I've been in this for so long, I'm kind of numb to this volatility and these swings. I wouldn't recommend anyone else does it, but because this is still half baked, right? Like I wouldn't, I'm okay with a lender out there seeing that on my bank statements and being like, hey, what the heck is this? Because there is so much fraud out there. So I think we just need more time for this to become more the norm. And that kind of goes back to the other question, right? Like, why do I buy crypto in so many places? Is because I want this to be a thing. If this is a thing, my investments are worth more. So another question from the chat here about mining. I'll go back to my earlier, my street cred slide, which in hindsight is such like a ridiculous title for a slide. But so these are computers that they use their computing power to support the blockchains that they are dedicated to. So the one on the left is Bitcoin, and the one on the right is Ethereum. And so the way that blockchains can work without middlemen is because they actually have a distributed network of computers that support the network, right? So when I say blocks are being added to the chain, every time a new block is being added to the chain, one of these two computers is figuring out this is the cryptography side of it. They're figuring out the hash of the next block, and when they do, that gets added to the chain, and they get rewarded for their work. So, like an Ethereum miner like that could earn a couple $100 a month. That Bitcoin one at the time, it was making maybe $50 a month at the prices of that day. But then in hindsight, it was thousands of dollars a month, just because the price at that time was like $100 a coin, and now it's like 40 grand or whatever it is today. So mining is using compute power to secure the blockchain network, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's Ethereum. There are a few others out there. That mining is this is a whole other topic. We have a few minutes left here, but this is very computationally expensive. There's a lot of people out there who don't want to use crypto just because of the environmental ramifications of it. Like this technology here on the right, Ethereum, is moving to a new way of supporting the network that doesn't involve mining. That instead, which it's called proof of stake instead of proof of work. Essentially, you put your assets up to confirm the network as opposed to using computational power. As I look back to the chat here, how do you feel about environmental impacts? I think they're probably a little overblown by people who are just looking for things to be against. Like Tesla, for example, like 3 months ago said, hey, we accept Bitcoin for Teslas now. You can buy one. And then a month later, we're like, oh, Bitcoin farms, they use so much electricity, they could be it's destroying the environment. You can't do this anymore. So it's a lot, in my opinion, it's a lot of just like people positioning themselves to like look more green than they are. I'm personally happy that Ethereum is moving away from mining to proof of stake. I think it is wasteful and doesn't need to be done to secure networks, and that the modern blockchains are doing that. And I'm happy for that. At the same time, I think the environmental impacts might be overblown when compared to all the other industries out there, right? Like the traditional finance industry, if you think about all the electricity used by the banks and the stock market and all of the tech that's used to keep traditional finance up, I think what's being used to keep Bitcoin up is probably a drop in that bucket, but one person's opinion. Yeah, a lot of people use things like that to influence the price so they can buy lower, or they will use narratives to drive prices up so they can sell higher. So someone in the chat here asked about using Bitcoins to buy a home. They say they got 980K. If you have 980K Bitcoins, that's like billions of dollars. You could easily have someone handle this for you. But I'm guessing you mean 900K USD in Bitcoin to buy a home. You would have to establish a relationship with an institutional crypto fund or a crypto provider like a Gemini or a Coinbase, and over time fill out all of their KYC documents. You'd have to upload your driver's license. You'd have to do all sorts of government IDs. They'll start with low limits. And if you're trying to convert 1 million of Bitcoin to USD and you've got no relationship at all with an exchange, you're probably looking at a couple of weeks. And I hope at that point you're buying in cash, because those large transactions coming into your bank account will raise the eyebrows of your lenders. So you would have to establish a relationship with a cryptocurrency exchange, provide them tons of documents so they know who you are, because they're very worried about money laundering. And they're going to give you account limits. Maybe it's 10,000 a day or 15,000 a day or 50K a week. And slowly over time, as they kind of like in the old days when you used to build relationships with your banker down the street, as you build that trust, they will allow you to do more and more. I don't think you could do 1 million right away. I think my account limits are somewhere like 50 to 100K or something like that for a week. But yeah, you just have to fill out a ton of paperwork, and you'd want to start it weeks and weeks before you started your home search. Angela, we're at time. I can continue on if there's any more questions, but I think we've wrapped it up here. I think I've beaten everyone over the head with my my thoughts on blockchain and crypto. Hopefully people found it valuable. I know it's, and I apologize to the gentleman before who thought this training was a foreign language. I'll take that to heart, and I'll go back and I'll try to simplify this for future presentations. But yeah, feel free to add me on LinkedIn, scan that barcode, and yeah, hit me up. I'd love to talk more.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. It has been a great presentation. Thank you again for being with us. We will definitely have you back with some of the tech updates. This video presentation is being recorded, so it will be available in our video library. And again, thank you, and thank everyone for being here, all of our members for participating, and everyone just have an awesome day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Angela.